Greetings, everyone in the Watson College community, and good morning. I'm out in our backyard early in the day and took that as an opportunity at the start of a new day, maybe with a little bit of sense of hope, to speak to you about recent events in the country, how they're impacting the university and the college, and in part to make a personal statement. I want to offer the following statement and thoughts in light of our recent trauma in our nation, and in particular for our families, communities, and children of color. And I offer it to all of us. It may seem a little long, and I appreciate your indulgence on that. It takes about 9 minutes if you read this on your own. 9 minutes. And maybe that's the providence of the moment. Please let me begin by stating this. I come to this a well-educated, degreed, white man of privilege. I work in a university as a dean, and I steward that office's power in trappings. I come as a father, a husband, and educator, a colleague, and hopefully a friend. Our lives have been dominated in the last 3 months by COVID-19 and what we have had to do to survive the progression of the virus. We have seen and experienced life-altering forces in the face of life-threatening risks. The coronavirus as a pandemic and our will to remain healthy and survive in the face of it have demanded unprecedented responses as individuals, as a campus, as parents and families, as educators, and as a community, state, nation, and world. We have absorbed seemingly inconceivable disruptions in our lives. We have as a country committed extraordinary treasure, and we will likely need more. We have altered our economic livelihoods, for some in unrecoverable ways, because it is what the conditions and the threat demand. I want to speak to you about a different risk, existential challenge, and demand in which we find ourselves. We have a crisis as a country, as a broader community, and as a university and college, with acts of violence against people and communities of color, particularly in the Black community, and most recently crystallized with the murder of George Floyd. Tragically, George Floyd's death is not a shocking incident because it is rare. It is part of a pattern, and it is its own form of an insidious social and moral pandemic. It is a disease of our democratic life, of our aspirations to form a more perfect union, and of our ability to be and live in the communities that we need. It is spread not by infection, but by the worst of intentions or the least of inaction. George Floyd's death is shocking because it is a tragic act of violence in the most human, existential way against a person's right to breathe and to live because he was Black. It is tragic because it is emblematic of a deep racialized and racist power structure and broad cultural tolerance for violence against Black men. And it is hate in its purest form, as one man has killed another with accomplices in what they presume to be institutionally sanctioned. We sometimes concern ourselves to know narratives of successful Black males. We celebrate them as stories of accomplishment and recognition. Sometimes we do this authentically, and sometimes in inauthentic ways of saying, we see, to create and co-opt and promote an identity we want people to believe we are, and to create narratives about ourselves and our institutions. We have recently, as a university, put the spotlight on the work of great educators and campus leaders. 2 of them are graduates of our MED program in higher education in the Watson College, and they are African-American men. In one message, UNCW recognized one young man for his leadership as an advisor with the University College and a recent recipient of a national award in university advising. What makes him unique for me is that he and I have a close personal relationship through my daughter. While I have the deepest respect for him as a colleague and professional, I have a much deeper relationship with and respect for him as a man. As a young man, He has committed his work to mentoring and supporting student success at UNCW. Among many gifts he brings to this world, he is intelligent, caring, and compassionate. He is one of the kindest people I know. But imagine this scenario. Put this young man on a street in downtown Wilmington, on Riceville Beach, in a local store, in a car, in a traffic stop, maybe even among the general population of UNCW, knowing nothing else but seeing him. Do we translate his being in the same way as we portrayed him in our university story of success? Do we assume a narrative of leader, exemplary educator, or as a successful young man who is making a difference that we embrace and celebrate? Or would we see a person to be avoided, maybe accosted, engaged by law enforcement, or psychologically, emotionally, and physically assaulted by the space he's in? We don't know. But the problem is, we don't know. And we can, in the current crisis, assume the manifest possibility of the worst. And I cannot, as a white man, know all the depths of the immediate or looming fear he must feel, given where we are in the signals we send to Black men and people of color. I feel it for him and for my biracial daughter who identifies as Black. And I know that I, as a white man, am immune to the threat they feel some way every day as a matter of their lives as people of color. I feel that concern for my child and the person she loves because they walk into a world with a depth of fear I cannot know, in a world where I cannot protect them from it. We all walk daily into that world where this social and moral pandemic is pervasive. And while we do not all carry that contagion with intention, we are infected by it nonetheless. So where and how do we go from here? And what does this demand of us? In one of the best known speeches of his extraordinary life, Frederick Douglass in 1857 articulated where we are now and where we find ourselves today. He spoke critically to the national conscience, especially when the undercurrents of our struggle rise to the fore or are forced to the fore by frustration, the tiredness of struggle, and the refusal to accept a fettered state of being anymore. In his speech, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress," Douglass declared, and I quote, "The whole history of the progress of human liberty shows that all concessions yet made to her august claims have been born of earnest struggle. The conflict has been exciting, agitating, all-absorbing, and for the time being putting all other tumults to silence. It must do this or it does nothing. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one. And it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will." Frederick Douglass, Rochester, New York, 1857. Some will dismiss Douglass's foresight of our times as a call for violence, but we are already in violent times. And some will dismiss it as acceptance or endorsement of violence for violence's sake. We must hold on to the knowledge that repeated past violence is in large measure what has brought us to now. Violence didn't start in reaction to George Floyd's death. Killing George Floyd was the violence. This is inherently about protest. To make all of this about anything else distracts us and derails us from the current crisis. We must embrace this struggle, and we must make the demand that power, in its insidious and destructive forms, concede, as Douglass demands, to human liberty. What happened to George Floyd and many Black men before him were original acts of violence, the original sins to this horrific act. And these acts sit on the shoulders of a history of unspeakable violence for decades and centuries. We need to acknowledge that and say it out loud if we are to move forward with any hope. And we have to be strong enough to know that the resonance of anger and vocal frustration is part of the energy of protest. Angry cannot be an adjective that some use to dismiss the protest speaker, or what is spoken, or the actor in the act of protest. If those of us that are threatened by the sense of anger allow it to be dismissed, then we are doomed. We must stand in this ocean, as Douglas says, and hear its awful roar. So what are we willing to demand? With the coronavirus, we have set the bar high, historically so, in what we have demanded of ourselves, our communities, and our institutions in the name of our well-being. We know what we are willing to do and can do in the name of sacrifice and survival. As we come to grips with the murder of George Floyd, and with it our incapacity to deal with a commitment to justice, what are we willing to disrupt, sacrifice, and endure? If we were to see these threats of social, moral, legal, and economic injustice for what they are, and determine a sense of urgency for our survival, as we have done with coronavirus, what could we accomplish? If we were to invest the same sense of passion and crisis response and sense of sacrifice, where could we get? If we committed a minuscule amount of the treasure to these challenges, as we have done with the virus, what could we realize? What if we did this as a national community, as a state or region, as a university, or as the Watson College? What if that was our demand? From a sense of our aspirations and hope, it is the right thing to do. From a sense of threat and danger, we can no longer afford not to do it. We have lifted out of the realm of hyperbole the phrase, people are dying. People are dying because of their skin color, because of their faith, because of their identity as the first peoples to live on these lands, because they love the person they love. And our social and moral life is dying and will die just as assuredly. As has been the case in so many crises before, education will be one of the most critical tools we have to get us to a better place. But it is not a given. It has to be demanded. In our charting the course process in the Watson College, we have consistently articulated a commitment to equity and inclusion as a strength of the college and as a core element of our path forward for the entire Watson College community. To realize it, we must commit to our responsibility to disrupt, to call out, to speak truth to power, and to invest what we can and where we can to create through our work the world as we would have it. We will take the full power of the Watson College and co-opt more where we need to and where need be, whatever it may be, to challenge and confront the hatred and bigotry we have seen as we travel this path together. Our demand is that we disrupt, sacrifice, and endure. Our demand is that our actions resound in the realization of justice and equity. Our demand is that we remake education and learning as the fundamental act of protest, equity, inclusion, social justice, and opportunity. It is my sincerest hope that while we are apart due to summer and to coronavirus, that our students, colleagues, and friends who may be living with fear, threat, and sense of abandonment will know that we all support you and we embrace you and your families and your loved ones. We are together as we may struggle to make sense of all of this for our children and young ones in and near our care. We will do it together, and we will embrace the security, respect, and dignity that all of us deserve. Peace to you all, comfort and grace in times of struggle, and we will see each other soon. Thank you.